Breaking news, a pandemic is currently spreading around the world. I mean, yeah, it's still COVID. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to alarm you. It's the same pandemic that we've been dealing with since 2020. It's not quite as bad anymore, so that's nice. Like, we no longer have so many people dying that we need to set up mobile morgues where we just have bodies stacked up in U-Hauls or whatever. That sure was an interesting time. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. And one way to prevent it from happening again is to go out and get vaccinated. I know, you anti-vaxxers in the audience, you're going to be in the comments. Yes, any day now, I will be dying suddenly because of all the vaccines I've had. Any day now. I'm just over here trying to live life to the fullest in the meanwhile. Being healthy and not freaking out over an extremely safe and effective shot. My dog is fully vaccinated too, so I just hope that when we inevitably go, we at least go together. Okay, with that out of the way, yeah, we're heading into the fall, and the best thing you can do for your health and for the health of those around you is to get the new updated COVID vaccination along with your flu vaccine. Here in the United States, the FDA has just approved new vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna that specifically target the current strain known as KP2. And as of this recording, those vaccines are rolling out to pharmacies around the country. Most, if not all, insurance companies should cover it, including Medicare and Medicaid. If you got a shot last year, thank you. But also that shot is no longer effective due to the time that has passed, as well as the fact that the strain that one was keyed in for is no longer circulating widely. So this is an important one to get. The timing depends on a couple of things. If you're high risk, you should go out and get it immediately. It also depends on whether or not you had COVID recently. Experts still recommend that you wait maybe 3 months after you recover from COVID and before you get the vaccine in order to make the most of your immunity. I have travel coming up at the end of October, so I'm going to aim to get mine by early October. You want a good 2 weeks before you're going to travel or go to any holiday parties or whatever. And remember, it's not 100% effective. So yeah, you are still going to want to mask up when you're in crowded places indoors. Try to avoid going out to restaurants and bars and things like that. Okay, so that concludes the good news. Now let's move on to the bad news. I specifically mentioned timing based on whether or not you've had COVID because nearly everyone I know has been infected with COVID this summer, including at least 4 people who, like me, had never tested positive before. Researchers have suspected for some time now that COVID's seasonality isn't quite like flu and RSV, which tend to just spike in the winter and then mostly disappear for the rest of the year. Just last month, immunologists published findings that show over the past several years, there have actually been 3 COVID spikes per year, a big one in the winter, and then smaller spikes in mid-spring and mid-summer. The vaccines only tend to be effective for 3 to 6 months. However, our governments are just barely suggesting that we all get vaccinated once per year. From a public health standpoint, this is what experts call completely brain dead. We should be getting shots at least twice a year, but we aren't. So a lot of people ended up sick and miserable and some dead this summer when there was really no need for them to be. To make matters worse, this month, the CDC is putting an end to the program that provided free vaccines to anyone who needed them, including the approximately 27 million American adults who do not have any health insurance at all. The vaccine costs $100 to $200 out of pocket, so we can safely assume that a decent number of people who want the vaccine will not be able to get it this year. Children can still get the vaccine for free, and some community health nonprofits may be able to scrounge up the money for some adults. But yeah, that's just another roadblock in the middle of a street that's already filled with potholes and is on a ledge crumbling into the sea. It's maybe like 2 guys keep walking across the street with a giant pane of glass between them. It's a very difficult street to traverse already. We don't need this. Finally, let's get to the worst news of all. As bad as American public health looks currently, We also have stopped caring about what's going to happen in the future. A few months ago, I told you about the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA, which was responsible for the huge success of Operation Warp Speed in pushing out COVID vaccines so quickly after the pandemic appeared. If our government gave BARDA just $24 billion, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy estimates it could have prototype vaccines ready for each of the 26 known viral families that cause human disease. Showing that these vaccines are safe and promote an immune response before we need them will allow for vaccines to be ready for deployment within 100 days after virus identification. Now, obviously that has not happened, but what I didn't mention back then was that back in 2021, the Biden administration did at least set aside $3.2 billion in funding to spread across multiple agencies with the express purpose of not just combating COVID-19, but also, as Anthony Fauci announced, to provide a durable structure to prepare from a therapeutic standpoint against any of the pandemic threats. What I recently learned, thanks to Jason Mast at Stat News, was that never happened. Once Omicron hit, the government siphoned off a bunch of that money onto more immediate wants and needs. A few labs were built, and then they were only given 3 of a promised 5 years of funding and told to just reapply later. When they did, they were told, sorry, money's all gone. All funding for all of those labs will be all gone by April of next year. The problem, as usual, is capitalism and political wankery. The experts point out that there is no return on investment for the pharmaceutical industry to drop money on vaccines and drugs that they may never be able to sell, so they just don't. Politicians are owned by big pharma and other industry lobbyists, and they don't believe that the average voter has the attention span to worry about what might be happening in a decade, or even 5 years, or next month. So what's the solution? Well, I know I'm a broken record, but it's this. Vote for the Democrats, and when they win, bully them. Yes, Democrats have been terrible on COVID policy, but unlike Republicans, they still have a tiny scrap of shame that allows them to be bullied. It's how we got Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden, and how we got Tim Walz instead of any of the more conservative VP picks. Bully your politicians. Let your representatives know that public health matters with your phone calls, with your letters, and of course with your votes. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.